Nobody talks to them like that. That is the first thing you need to understand about what happened and why it landed the way it landed, and why this person is still sitting with it days later in a way that is simultaneously uncomfortable and the most alive they have felt in a conversation in longer than they can immediately account for. Nobody talks to them like that. Not because people lack opinions about them, not because there is no dissent or disagreement or private reservations about the things they do and the way they do them. All of that exists in abundance. But it exists in the form of whispers and strategic silences and the specific, highly evolved social choreography that develops around people with enough status to make honesty feel expensive. People calculate before they speak to this person. How will this land? What will it cost? Is the truth I am about to tell worth what telling it might do to my position in the ecosystem of this person's regard? Is this hill worth dying on? More often than not, the answer is no, and the truth gets rerouted into something more diplomatic, and the moment passes, and the person with the status receives another carefully managed version of reality that tells them more about what they want to hear than about what is actually true. And then you opened your mouth. Let me tell you what high status actually means in the context of this person, because it is not purely about money or title or the external markers that the word sometimes collapses into. It is about the specific accumulated weight of having been treated as someone whose perspective is default correct for long enough that they have stopped fully questioning whether it is. Status, when it is sustained across enough time and enough contexts, does something to a person's relationship with their own certainty. It does not make them stupid. It does not remove their capacity for genuine reflection, but it creates a specific gravitational field around their opinions. People defer, they modify their own assessments in the direction of this person's view before they have fully examined whether the modification is warranted. They treat the high status perspective as the baseline from which everything else is measured, rather than as one perspective among many that should be measured against something more objective. This person has been living inside that gravitational field for a while. And the field, like all gravitational fields, has bent things. Their perception of their own accuracy, their expectation of being agreed with, their response, internal, visceral, immediately present to the experience of not being agreed with. That response is usually displeasure. What they felt when you spoke was something different from displeasure. That something different is what this reading is about. You stood on your ground and you spoke from it. I want to dwell on this for a moment because it is the most important thing in this reading, and I do not want to move past it before it has fully landed. The gravitational field did not pull you, not because you are immune to social pressure or indifferent to the dynamics of status in the rooms you move through. You are not indifferent. You are, in fact, acutely aware of how those dynamics operate. Your perception registered the field immediately. You understood the weight of who you were speaking to and what was typically expected in exchanges with someone who carried that weight. You simply continued. The awareness did not move you from your position. And that distinction between awareness and adjustment between noticing and conceding is one of the most specific and most Virgo things about you. You process information about the environment you are in without allowing that processing to become a referendum on whether to be yourself in that environment. Most people in that room could not have done that, not because they are weaker or less certain of their own views, but because they have not yet built the specific quality of self possession that comes from having done enough internal work to know exactly where you stand and having stood there long enough through enough different kinds of pressure that the standing has become structural rather than effortful. Your ground is not something you maintain, it is something you are. And the difference between those two things is everything. What did you say? I am not going to invent the content. I cannot know the specific words, the specific room, the specific situation that produced the moment. What I can speak to is the quality of what you brought into the exchange. The specific texture of how you delivered something true to someone who is not accustomed to receiving truth in its unmanaged form. You did not hedge. That is the first thing. In the specific Virgo way of someone who has identified what they actually think and sees no compelling reason to wrap it in enough qualification to make it comfortable before offering it, you said the thing without the wrapping, not brutally, not with the aggressive directness of someone who is trying to wound rather than illuminate, but cleanly, with the specific economy of language that belongs to people who respect the intelligence of the person they are speaking to enough not to over explain. You said the true thing. And the true thing in this case was something this person needed to hear and had not been hearing because the field around them had been filtering it out before it could reach them. You walked through the field like it was not there. Not because you did not notice it, you noticed it, but the field does not operate on you the way it operates on people for whom this person's regard is a resource they cannot afford to lose. You have your own center of gravity, your own ground, and ground is the only thing that makes a gravitational field optional rather than mandatory. You stood on your ground, and you spoke from it. Let me describe what happened in them when the words landed. The first response was the one they have developed over years of living inside the field. The automatic, almost reflexive response of someone whose system is calibrated to treat unsolicited challenge as a threat to be neutralized. Something tightened. The specific quality of a person whose perimeter has been breached and whose first instinct is to close it, they prepared a response. The kind of response they have used before in similar situations, which is to say, situations where someone said something that contradicted their view of themselves or their decisions. The response that reframes the challenge as a misunderstanding, that absorbs the content of what was said and produces a version of it that is less uncomfortable. That maintains the general architecture of their existing self perception while conceding just enough to appear open minded without actually revising anything. They had the response ready, and then something stopped them from delivering it. What stopped them was the specific quality of how you said what you said, not the content, the manner, because the response they had prepared was built to counter aggression or naivety or the kind of challenge that comes from someone who has a stake in being right rather than a genuine orientation toward truth. And what you had was not aggression or naivety or a stake in being right, You had accuracy, the quiet, grounded, entirely unperformative accuracy of someone who has looked at a situation clearly and described what they saw. No heat, no agenda, no investment in the reception of the description beyond the ordinary investment that anyone has in truth being heard. The prepared response had nothing to push against. And here is the thing about a reality check delivered without heat. Heat gives the recipient something to respond to, something that is about the delivery rather than the content, something that lets them redirect the conversation toward the manner of the saying rather than the truth of what was said. Most challenges to a person's self perception arrive with enough heat that this redirection is available and, when deployed, skillfully effective. Yours had no heat, which means there was nothing to redirect toward, nothing to respond to except the content itself, nothing to say about how you said it that would have allowed the substance of it to be avoided. Just the thing you said, sitting in the air between you, requiring a response that was going to have to actually engage with it rather than with you. For someone accustomed to having the option of the redirect, this was disorienting in a way that they could not immediately name. They had to actually sit with what you said. And sitting with it, really sitting with it, without the exit ramp of responding to the manner rather than the matter, produced something in them that did not resolve quickly. A recognition that moved through the layers of their certainty slowly, the way water moves through stone, not breaking anything, but finding the spaces. I want to speak to what they did after the conversation ended, because the conversation did not end the moment the words stopped. It continued in them, in the specific involuntary form of a person turning something over in their mind that they would prefer to set down and finding that it will not stay where they put it. They replayed it, not to find the flaw in what you said. They looked for the flaw, the place where your accuracy broke down, the detail you had wrong, the context you were missing, the angle from which what you described was not actually accurate, but only appeared accurate from your limited position in the situation. They did not find it. That is the part that has been sitting with them. Not the challenge itself, not the discomfort of receiving something unwelcome, but the specific, quietly vertiginous experience of looking for the counter argument and not locating one, of applying their considerable intelligence to the project of disproving what you said and arriving repeatedly at the same destination. You were right. The acknowledgement of this has not been said out loud. It is still in the interior, where it arrived and has been living since, too significant to dismiss and too uncomfortable to fully surface yet. But it is there, solid, taking up space, changing the landscape of how they see the specific situation you addressed in ways that are already quietly influencing their behavior, whether or not they have consciously decided to let it. Let me speak to how the people around this person have responded to what happened, because there were witnesses, and witnesses matter. Some of them were stunned, not by what you said, but by the fact of it being said, by someone saying the obvious true thing directly to this person without the wrapping and the hedging and the diplomatic infrastructure that everyone else has been deploying around that same truth for a while. The stunned quality in those witnesses was not discomfort. It was the specific feeling of watching someone do something you had not considered possible and discovering immediately that it was. Some of them were quietly relieved, in the way of people who have been carrying a frustration privately and who, in the moment that someone else names it out loud, feel the specific exhaled relief of not being alone with what they have been holding. You said the thing they have been not saying, and the saying of it in that room in front of this person changed something about what is now possible to say, raised the ceiling on what is speakable, made the truth slightly more available to everyone in that space going forward. And some of them, the ones closest to the person who received the reality check, are watching that person carefully, noticing the specific quality of how they have been moving since the conversation, the slight difference in their certainty, the moments where they have almost said something that sounded like acknowledgement and then pulled back. The evidence visible to the people who know them best that something has shifted in how they are holding the thing you addressed. They are all, in their own way, thinking about you. I want to ask you something directly. Did you know what you were doing? Did you enter that exchange with the understanding that you were about to deliver something significant to someone who would not be expecting it? Or did you simply speak the thing that seemed obvious to say in the moment and discover afterward, through the quality of the response and the quality of the silence and the quality of the looks from the people in the periphery, that what felt ordinary to you registered as extraordinary to everyone else present? I feel it was the second one. I feel you said the thing because it was true and because, in the specific interior economy of your own values, saying the true thing in the face of something that required it is simply what you do, not heroically, not with awareness of the weight it carries, just as the natural, automatic, cannot really do otherwise expression of who you are. The absence of heroism in your delivery is what made it powerful. Heroes know they are being brave. That knowledge changes the quality of the act. It introduces a self awareness that is visible to the people watching, that gives the moment a performed quality even when the bravery is genuine. You did not perform this, you just told the truth. And truth told without performance, in a room full of people who've been watching a performance for a long time, arrives with a force that the speaker does not feel, but that everyone else in the room cannot miss. They are not going to forget this conversation. Let me speak to what changes between you and this person going forward. Because a reality check of this quality does not simply reset to the prior dynamic once delivered. It restructures the dynamic, not dramatically, not with announcement, but in the small, durable, actually matters in practice ways that restructured relationships express themselves over time. They are going to engage with you differently. The specific change is going to be in how much they perform in your presence. The version of themselves that exists for an audience that is expected to defer that version requires a particular quality of attention from the people around it in order to sustain itself. It needs the deference to be actively happening in order to remain the operating mode. And you are now established in the understanding of this person and everyone who witnessed what you said as someone for whom the performing mode does not apply. You are not in the audience. You are in the room, your own room, with your own ground. And they can feel the difference between talking to someone who is in their audience and talking to someone who is simply in their presence as an equal. That feeling is unfamiliar, and quietly they prefer it. More honest things are going to be possible between you than were possible before. Not because they became a different person, because you established the terms of what this specific relationship can be without negotiating them. You established them simply by being who you are in a moment that required it. And now both of you are operating from those terms, whether it has been formally acknowledged or not. Now, let me speak to this high status person's interior, the private version of where they are, separate from the face they are presenting to the world and to the people around them who have their own relationship with the reality check and its delivery. They respect you, not in the polished, publicly expressed, this is what I say when cameras are on form of respect, in the quieter, harder to admit, more structurally real form, the kind that develops not through admiration of someone's qualities in the abstract, but through the specific experience of having encountered those qualities in a context that cost you something to receive them. Respect earned through being genuinely checked is a different quality of respect from respect earned through being impressed. It has weight to it, durability, the specific quality of something that has been tested rather than simply awarded. They tested you, in a sense, without meaning to. The field around them is a test that most people fail by adjusting. You passed by not adjusting. And now they are sitting with the specific, unfamiliar experience of having been spoken to honestly by someone who did not need anything from them, who had no stake in their regard, who said the true thing not to impress or to wound or to establish dominance, but simply because the true thing was what the moment required. That combination, no stake, no heat, complete accuracy, has produced a form of respect in them that they have not felt for a person in a specific way in a long time. They are not going to forget this conversation. One thing before this closes, the reality check you delivered was not only for them. It was for everyone in that room who has been watching the truth get managed and redirected and carefully avoided in the presence of this person. For everyone who has felt the cost of honesty in that specific context and has paid it by staying quiet. For everyone whose private assessment of the situation has been left unexpressed because the field was too strong and the risk felt too high, you changed what is possible in that room. Not dramatically, not permanently necessarily, but you moved the ceiling. You demonstrated in real time and in front of witnesses that the truth can be said and the field can be walked through, and the status does not actually require the deference that has been building around it. You showed what it looks like to have your own ground and to stand on it regardless of what the gravitational field of another person's status is doing around you. Some of those witnesses are going to remember that. Some of them are going to find in a future moment that requires something from them that they would previously have swallowed, that they have more access than they thought to what you demonstrated. That is not a small thing. That is the specific, rippling, impossible to fully trace consequence of one person choosing not to manage the truth in a moment when managing it would have been the easier option. You chose not to manage it. The room felt what that choice produced, and so did the person it was directed at, sitting with it still,